Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. If you continually poke the bear, eventually it will respond. And so it is that the press conference fronted by WBO champion Joseph Parker's promoter David Higgins earlier this week, it has drawn out unified heavyweight champion Anthony Joshua. The haphazard media event was most notable for Higgins's interesting antics, a video presentation that repeatedly questioned Joshua's chin, and for the fact it was streamed over the internet on a grainy and shaky phone. In many respects, it was must-watch viewing just because it was so bad. It was like watching The Office, the TV series The Office that is, with David Brent. All of it was, of course, directed at Anthony Joshua, who, according to Higgins, has a glass jaw that needs to be shattered by Parker if they can reach terms on a unification bout. Speaking to the media in Dubai, Joshua says Parker is investing his time in the wrong areas. Does he want publicity? Is it a PR stunt? It's not about worrying about how we fight. Joshua says, I fought Vladimir Klitschko too early, but the opportunity came and we managed to come together with one of the all-time greats. We put on a show with no complaints. So what is so difficult about fighting this little kid who was doing press conferences? It's very unprofessional of them. The heavyweight championship is such a respected title to have, but stuff like that takes away from the creme de la creme of the title. Boxing is not complicated when working with us. They need to put their egos aside and stop doing silly things like that press conference. I think I know what I have to do with Wilder, but Parker, I don't disregard him, but I think I'd smack Parker around the ring, no problem. Wilder, I'd knock Wilder out. It would definitely take a bit of time, but I'd definitely knock him out. Parker would take a bit more of a pasting, but I'd get to him. Wilder, I'd knock him out with one shot. Not like I'd go in there and bang, but just when I catch Wilder, I'd definitely knock him out. Those were Anthony Joshua's comments speaking to media in Dubai. So a couple of things that I do want to pick up there. In respect of the comment, is Parker investing his time in the wrong areas? Does he want publicity? Is it a PR stunt? It's not about worrying about how we fight. Joshua kind of answered the question that he posed. The event, the media event that is, it was held to generate publicity. Plain and simple, because Parker needs the publicity. And dropping the glass jaw video, it was a stunt. I mean, the whole event was a stunt. A lot of us expected it would be, and it proved to be so. The fact it was so bad and cringeworthy just made it more compelling. And Joshua is right. It does have no bearing on the fight proper. And the fact that David Higgins feels he has to revert to shock tactics to get people to pay any attention to Joseph Parker, that's a concern. And for me, it's an indictment of the WBO's champion's worldwide profile and that it isn't where it should be. And it would be easy just to put it all down to the fact that, well, Parker, he's been fighting mainly in New Zealand. But it's definitely more than that. He has been champion for a while. People know who Joseph Parker is now. But his profile, it's not going up. People aren't respecting him any more than they did before. I mean, boxing fans, they know who he is, but the casuals, no idea. Outside of the sort of build-up part of a fight, Parker is largely invisible to the public. It's a real problem that I think he's got. Even at his own news events, Higgins and Kevin Barry are doing 95% of the talking. Just go back and have a look at any of these events that have been held recently. Parker is sitting there off to the side, holding the belt, looking like a prop. He has all these social media platforms to grow and enhance his profile, but they are simply not utilized nearly enough. By way of example, Parker has 237,000 Facebook followers. But he's only posted once in November, and it's not even about boxing. He has 55,000 Twitter followers, but has only made a dozen tweets or retweets, so that's not separate, that's combined, in October and November, so 12 total in nearly 2 months. Boxers who utilize Twitter would do that many in a day, some even before lunchtime. The likes of Dave Allen, Tyson Fury, Dillian White, Lucas Brown, they all use Twitter to interact with their fans, get people talking, generate some buzz, some hype, and keep their name out there. Instagram, 144,000 followers. 3 posts this month, none really overtly about boxing. Parker even has his own official YouTube channel, and I'm sure that will come as news to some of you, and to others it might be like, oh yeah, that's right, he does. But it's also a situation where it's seriously undercooked on the content side. So what I'm getting at is he has an audience, but not much is coming their way. Even Duco's boxing page, which I think has 91,000 people that follow it, that's on Facebook, it's largely just reposting stories that the news media has written about Parker. Some might think, well, it's just social media, what does it matter? It matters because social media is an incredibly powerful tool and influencer if used correctly. Shannon Briggs, as an example, reinvented himself on social media with the whole Let's Go Champ thing. Deontay Wilder's recent tirade on social media towards Anthony Joshua, that was almost a daily thing there for a while. It boosted his profile significantly, got a lot of people talking, and for a period of time his profile was up. But this is the key with social media, and big social media stars can attest, and you can probably think of a few across any of the platforms that I've already named. The key is posting regularly, and it can't be understated. And also, you've got to be posting content your followers or subscribers can engage with. The old saying, out of sight, out of mind, it is so true. So Parker and his team have got to look at some of this stuff because his profile is not just going to go up because he's the WBO champion. They've actually got to work at some of that stuff, have a proper strategy in place, a coherent one. Next statement I wanted to touch on. So what is so difficult about fighting this little kid who is doing press conferences? It's very unprofessional of them. The heavyweight championship is such a respected title to have, but stuff like that takes away from the creme de la creme of the title. I agree there. The shambolic and disjointed nature of the whole thing with Higgins' behaviour at the heart of it, it was unprofessional and unnecessary. And this is where I'm sure that there will be some people in New Zealand at least who probably have a difference of opinion here. What I have noticed since the initial post-press conference dismay and ridicule from a number of fans is that in New Zealand there has actually been a perceptible shift of view. And it's been driven actually as a result of media coverage. Now there's a lot of people saying, look, Higgins, he knows what he's doing. He caught the attention of the world's media and he generated some headlines. Well, that's got to be a good thing for Parker, etc., and so on. And we've actually reached the point, and you'll be familiar with this if you're from a small country like New Zealand, like I am. New Zealand media now is running stories about international media running stories. You heard that right. They are writing stories saying, oh, look how much, Higgins has generated headlines. So we've actually got this whole self-licking ice cream going on, where the mainstream media is effectively praising Higgins because he generated the headlines. And it's all being portrayed as a masterstroke. For me, though, I'm standing back looking at the situation going, what did it really achieve? Ahead of that news conference, both sides had well-stated ambitions to make this unification bout. They want to make that fight. They'd already been negotiating. And they went into that presser and they said, okay, 35% net profit, bottom line. And since then, we've heard Eddie Hearn say, well, we're close, but he's ruled out 35%. So it hasn't forced Eddie Hearn's hand. It hasn't forced the fight into fruition. We're still in the same place we were when it happened a couple days back. Except Higgins did successfully, I think in my view, put the ball back in Hearn and Joshua's camp, put it on them. So I guess that is a positive. Well, that was something I took away. But it did get a lot of people talking. I'm not going to deny that. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I do note some people are saying it's actually good for the pay-per-view potentially and it will build interest. I'm not sure I'd go that far though. There is no fight yet. And even when there is, it's 4 or more months away. People won't remember this in 6 months' time, 5 months' time, whenever the fight is, say if it's in March or April. Casuals won't really get excited for the fight until much closer, in the few weeks before. And that's when a Higgins special like we've seen might count for something. But right now, it just kind of seems a bit odd and, surplus to requirement. And if we actually examine that post-presser coverage, it wasn't about the fight per se that could be made. It was more about Higgins and his behaviour. It wasn't about Parker. And a decent chunk of it was the coverage was based around the cringeworthy nature of it and the sort of things that, the stunts that were sort of pulled in it. So, it's hard to sort of, this unprofessional cry from Anthony Joshua, it's hard to sort of go, well, it's not true, because I don't think Duco covered themselves in glory with a news conference that was clearly arranged at short notice, and it went all over the place and was streamed over the internet on a cell phone that looked like it was 10 years old and someone couldn't hold it straight. Think about it like this. Parker is on the verge of the biggest fight that can be made in the heavyweight division, with arguably the biggest or close to the biggest star in boxing. Any official event that he has now, it was always going to generate headlines and interest, especially if they actually had something to say, and if there was some sort of scathing comment coming directly from Parker. Why is Higgins putting himself at the centre of all this? Joseph Parker needs to be front and centre in some of this. We know that's not a strong suit, but he's the fighter. I mean, I had a really funny comment in one of the videos the other day saying, who's Joseph Parker? I hear Higgins is fighting Joshua in China next year. And that's kind of the impression. I mean, you would think that Higgins is the one that'll be getting in the ring with some of the carry-on. I don't think they need to take it to the cheap and crass end of town, because there was an audience waiting for any updates anyway. Boxing fans, you're coming to this channel because you want to hear the news. We would have been waiting for the news. In the end, we had a sideshow. And what's going to happen when the shock tactics wear thin? The coverage will dry up. It'll start falling flat because it loses its impact. And I suspect that part of the streaming thing was they expected there was going to be one of the bigger websites in New Zealand would stream the press conference. But it didn't happen. They came to one a couple of weeks ago. A couple of websites streamed it, but it didn't result in anything. There was no big announcement. And this one was billed as a bit of an update. So clearly no one came prepared to stream this thing on a grand scale like they did a couple of weeks ago. So we were left with a somewhat less than optimal phone option, which kind of just added to the whole sideshow. And just on this whole thing, the whole trash game that, Kevin Barry and David Higgins were talking up, it doesn't really suit Parker and his persona. It doesn't fit with his image and how he's been portrayed so far. So I do hope he's not forced to compromise who he is. I'm sure Higgins, he's going to prove effective if they can make this fight, and in the build-up, there'll be a couple of moments where you go, that's classic David Higgins. But firing off in all directions right now, what's the point? Can't you just negotiate behind closed doors, come back to us with some good news, some actual news? I'm not sure these sort of press conferences help the negotiations in any way. It doesn't make anything go along any faster. I don't know. What do you think? Drop a comment, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.